Okay, this screencast is a little adjunct to Teaching Week 35. Teaching Week 35 is about programmatically calling web services. But we're in the run-up to assignment 3, and I wanted to just go over some aspects of what we might call the professional practice parts of the module, specifically to do with configuration and source management and Git. And I wanted to go over the process of setting up a new project in Git, and how you construct something for a Grails app, for example, although it's applicable to any kind of a project. The best way to become familiar with this is to start and make it a part of your process. So any module where you're creating code, the best way to learn Git is to create a project and check your code in there, and then you've got it for your life, basically, for as long as you want to keep it. And it's also getting you into that very definitely professional practice mode of working where you're actually checking your code into a source repository, and it'll become second nature to you. So it's definitely worthwhile. So if we wanted to create a project from scratch and to have it managed by Git, the first thing we do is we go to GitHub, and I'm already logged in as my ACESII user, and we're going to say new repository, and we're going to call this org.ws as an example application. So this would be org web service, something that we'll discuss in the lecture. I'll just say create repository. Okay, and Git has responded with some instructions on how we can make our client know who we are, so that the commit messages have useful text in them. I've already done this, but if you're setting up Git for the first time, you should do it. And then it gives us some steps for creating a local directory that we can use. Some other information for different use cases, so if you're importing an existing Git repository, or if you're importing some subversion source code, neither of which we are, so we're just going to go with this next steps part. I grab a console, I'll cd to my dev directory. Okay, and so I'll run these commands in that window. So you can see that we have created an org.ws directory, cd'd into it, initialized Git, created a readme file, done a commit, and then we've added the remote Git origin to our local Git repository, and then we've pushed up the changes, which will include this readme file for our first commit. So on Git we'll click continue, and you can see this is our project homepage with the readme file, okay, which is empty. The first thing we're going to do in our project is to set up some branches. So branches are a way of managing different streams of development, and in particular the one that we're interested in here is a release branch and a development branch, and this allows us to keep separate track of code which we think is currently live on a website, for example, and code which we're currently developing which isn't for public consumption, but we want to keep these two things, in sync. So the Git commands that I'm going to use are git branch, which will create a new branch, and first we're going to create the developer branch. Before I hit the go button, if you look here, this drop down switch between branches just has the master branch at the moment, so branches 1. So if I run this command, that's created a develop branch on my local Git repository, but in order to make GitHub know about this, I need to push information about this branch up to the remote Git repository. So I'll say git push origin, which is GitHub, and then the name of the branch, which is develop. So this is pushing my develop branch from local up to GitHub. And if we go here and refresh, we've got branches 2, and we should be able to see the develop branch. What I'll do is I'll repeat that for a release branch. Okay. And you can see 3 branches now, and develop, master and release. Okay. So having done all the setup, we need to actually create our application. So in order to switch to the development branch, which is where we want to do our first pieces of work, we'll say git checkout develop. So this is telling Git we want to work on the development branch. If I wish to switch to the release branch, I'd say git checkout release. Okay. Okay, and you can see we get a message saying switch to branch develop, switch to branch release. So I'll go back to the develop branch, and I'm going to use the Grails create app command. So Grails create app org ws. So what this is doing is setting up a new Grails project for us that will be on disk but not checked into our local Git repository. Okay, so if I do an ls there, we've got our .git file which tells Git all its status information. We've got the readme file, and then we've got this new directory called org.ws. If I do a git status, Git tells us untracked files and lists this org.ws directory. So the command I need to add this directory to Git is git space add and then the directory name org.ws, and Git will recurse through directory and add everything underneath it as well. So if I say git status now, it'll say, oh, look at all these new files that we've checked in. Okay, so they've been added to Git but not committed to our local repository, so we'll commit them now. Git commit everything with a message of initial import of new app. That's committed them to our local repository, and now we want to push them up to the remote repository. Git push. Okay, we can still only see a readme file, and the reason for that is that we're currently looking at the master branch, and we've only checked these changes in to the develop branch. If we switch the branch to develop, you'll see we've now got this org.ws folder which contains the Grails application. And the other thing which I'll just show you while we're here is if I click on network, you'll see that there's a graph which GitHub can show us, and it says here's the master and release branches, and the develop branch has deviated by one commit so far from where those two branches are. So it's one commit ahead, and the message is initial import of new app. So if I cd into the org.ws folder, which is where our Grails application is, the first thing we're going to do is to create a domain class. So the command is Grails create domain class, and we're going to create a domain class called organization. I'll stop that, and I'll create a domain class actually called organization. Like that. So Grails is just spinning up in the background. You can actually run the Grails command in a shell mode, so it doesn't have to start up every time like this, but for the demo it's better to do it this way. So when you create a class, Grails has to go through and check the whole project and make sure everything's up to date, so you can see it building the project in the background. Okay, and you can it tells us it's created a file. It's put it in a package called org.ws, which is the default for the app and organization. So what I'll do is I'll just edit that file, and we'll give organization some properties. So I don't know, name and shortcode and postcode. So we've added 3 properties, and if I say git status, we can now see that this folder Grails app domain is there. There's also this target and test. Test contains our unit classes. Target contains transient files. We could add it, but I'm not going to. We don't need to. So I'll say git add domain and the test directories. Git commit -a for everything, and the message is added organization domain class, and we'll push that change up. Okay, if I refresh my network graph, okay, you'll see that the develop branch is now ahead by 2 commits. This is my initial import, and this is the one I've just committed and pushed, which is added an organization domain class. You'll notice that what I'm doing is I'm trying to commit small discrete pieces of work. I'm not working on loads of features, so I've not created the app and then added the organization class and then done my next job and then committed. I've done lots of small pieces of work, and that's better for us because it means we get better tracking in Git, so the messages all refer to what's happened. And also, there's much less chance of a conflict with somebody else editing the same file as me if I just make small changes and commit them. So this, from my perspective, is a much better workflow. Try and commit small discrete changes that just change one thing, and then you can always undo particular things or merge particular things. So this is a better practice than doing monolithic commits that change the entire application. That sort of thing is going to get you in trouble. So if I were looking at a commit graph for one of your projects, I'd really like to see lots of short commits rather than, one commit that said made everything work. Back in the application, so I've got our Grails app domain class now, and I've got this organization. Grails has a command a little bit like the cake bake command that will automatically create controllers and scaffolded views for a domain class. So I can say Grails, and the command is generate all, and I give it a fully qualified path. So it's orgws.organization. If I type that right, so Grails is now generating the controller and the views. Okay, if I do a git status, I can see that I've now got a new controllers folder. I've got an organization folder and the views folder and a new unit test. Again, these are auto-generated, we can ignore them. You can add them if you want, but there's no need. So I'll say git add the controllers folder, the organization views folder, and this unit test. And I'll commit everything with a message of added scaffold controller and view for org class or org domain class. Okay, and I'll push those changes to Git. Refresh here. Just to show you, you'll see another small commit along the way, and the third one, added scaffolded controller and view for org domain class. Good. So if I run this application, Grails run-app, once we've actually typed the run app command, we can leave it running and dynamically make changes to the app, but again, it just keeps things clean if I start everything up individually. So running Grails application, in a moment it should say, give us a URL that we can browse to. Yep, server running, browse to this URL. So I'll paste that into the browser window. Small delay the first time round because it has to compile the view components. Oh, I need to actually press the enter key as well. Okay, so this is the Grails front page. And here's the controller that we've generated, the organization controller. So we'll go in there and front page, let us go back to the home page, or we can create a new organization, and this is listing the ones we've got already. So we'll click new just for fun, and Sheffield Hallam Uni is somewhere in S3, and SHU as a shortcode. Create. Okay, so one created. If we go back to the list, you'll see it's listed there. So we might say, oh wow, this is great, this is our first release, and what we've got is we've got a few commits on our development branch as we've arrived at this point, and what we're saying is, oh, what we've got at this point after we've generated these scaffolded things is our first release. So I'm going to stop that running. I'm going to switch to the release branch, and what I'm going to do is to merge all the changes from the development branch onto the release branch with git merge. There's a little command or parameter which is often used in this case called -no-ff, which means no fast forward, and it's just a way of preserving the commit history between branches. So we'll use that flag, and so it's git merge, any optional flags, and then the name of the branch we want to merge into this. So we would like to merge the development branch into the release branch. So git merge no-ff develop. So we're on the release branch and we want to merge the changes from develop into this branch. It lists all the changes that it's merged, okay, lots of information, and then we can just git push that. So if I reload the graph, you'll see that here's our develop branch, and you can see that it's been merged into the release branch, so now these two things are essentially equivalent. And what's going to happen, of course, is if I switch back to the development branch, check out develop, I'll just edit the readme. What I'll do is make some changes on the dev branch and commit them. Oh dear, edited readme. Okay, and I'll push that change, so that's on the development branch, and you should see in here that the development branch now has diverged again and is separate to the release branch. And the reason that this is important is we can now make hot fixes, we can make temporary fixes to the release branch, and if we need to we can merge those changes back into the development branch, but it means that we can now work on our application without destabilizing our released application until we've gone through a round of testing and we think we're ready to upgrade everything. So that's a brief introduction to managing a Grails project with GitHub. Yeah, have a play with it. As I said, best thing to do is if you're developing code in other modules, check it into Git and try and manage it in there just so you get used to the process. Any questions, save them for the tutorial, really. Okay, thanks.